This week, something happened which will change the way you think about EVs. Mercedes AMG GT XX, an electric hypercar, during its brutal 8-day endurance run, broke so many EV records, or I would say made history and wrote completely new records that I never thought were possible actually. What's the record, you might ask? 40,075 kilometers in just 7.5 days. That's like traveling across the earth. But you might hear it and you say, okay, yeah, that's good, but what does it mean? Let me tell you another fact. The amount of energy that was charged, according to my analysis, during those 7.5 days equals to what an average European driver consumes during 8 to 9 years. Imagine that. 1 week energy that was charged during those charging sessions equals to 8 to 9 years. That's how brutal that endurance run was. And it was successful. So this is going to be a 2-part explainer series. In this part, which is the first one, I will be explaining more about the facts, what was the location, which records were broken, and also touch a little bit base on the charging equipment that was used. But if you're somebody who likes technical details, part 2 will be really interesting for you because I'll be sharing my estimates and calculations. For example, I looked at the complete possible scenario that was available for me. Not all of the information were disclosed. For example, I do not know the battery size, but I have tried to estimate a lot of things. But you will see the temperature on those 8 days, also the wind speed, how much time and energy is consumed while completing one lap, and after how many laps there was a break to charge the car and perhaps also to change the tires, drivers, and how much energy was delivered during those charging breaks. And finally, how much laps, average speeds, all the really good stuff will be there. So this record was set in Italy's Nardò's high-speed oval. So the total track length of Nardò's oval is around 12.68 kilometers, on which usually a person can drive quite comfortably 220 to 250 kilometers per hour, and it feels like, because of the huge banking angle it has, it feels like you're almost driving in a straight line. So Mercedes brought over here not one, actually 2 prototypes, and they were traveling at a constant speed of 300 kilometers per hour. That's actually a huge number for an electric vehicle. Then we talk about the charging specs. So according to Mercedes, they were charging with an average power of 850 kilowatts. With these 2 boundary conditions, Mercedes actually ran over 7.5 days, or to be very precise, it was 7 days, 13 hours, 24 minutes. This means that Mercedes traveled across the world in just 7.5 days. Not just once, but twice, because they had 2 prototypes over there. To prove that it's not just one-time experiment, it is also repetitive, which is essentially a huge thing. Before I move forward, let's recap what are the existing records. So Xiaomi Vayu 7 was just launched in June this year, and it made a lot of historic headlines, I would say, because during the first 3 minutes, 200,000 vehicles pre-orders were already placed. And by the time first hour was over, around 289,000 orders were placed. And just to give you a context, the total orders that were placed in China for Tesla Model Y last year were 480,000. So that's the scale that we are talking when it comes to success of Xiaomi Vayu 7. So they made an endurance record in 24 hours. They traveled 3,944 kilometers in just 24 hours. This was roughly around June time. It made huge headlines. But then came into the picture another Chinese name, XPENG, with their P7. Just on 15th August 2025, so yeah, couple of weeks back, they broke the record by driving 3,961 kilometers in 24 hours. That's 17 kilometers more. All good, right? Now here are the Mercedes numbers. They drove on the first day 5,479 kilometers in 24 hours. That's breaking both of the record of Xiaomi and XPENG by 38%. Alright, that's one thing. Now consider that they drove for 7.5 days. So over 7 days, each day on average, they travel 5,300 kilometers. So this means they broke both Xiaomi and XPENG records by 34%, 7 consecutive days. So on the first day, they traveled 5,479 kilometers, and the next 3 days, they were roughly averaging 5,385 kilometers. On the 5th day, there was a slight blip, so they went down to 5,175 kilometers. So the last 4 days, I would say, so the last 3 days, I would say, or actually including fourth day, they had some blips in their performance. So that's the first chart. So here's another graph to show you. So all of these graphs are actually available on my website. But the blue line is going to show the cumulative number of kilometers that were accumulated over time. This means that you started with 0, and by the end of the 7.5 day, you are at 40,075 kilometers. At the beginning, the average speed was 229 kilometers per hour, but by the end of this total distance, I would say over 7.5 days, they ended the sprint with 221 kilometers per hour. But every day, the average speed was kind of different because the first 4 days, I would say, were quite stable, 228, 224, 224. Yeah, this is quite stable numbers. But on the fifth day, it dropped to 215 kilometers per hour. Not sure what happened over there, but somehow they recovered on the sixth day. But again, on seventh and eighth day, there was a slight dip and going down. Perhaps it had to do with the number of laps they were doing. Also, the car was probably not able to cool down as much so that they could charge much more rapidly. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating in this first part, but this is the first information. You might ask that how many hours that they were traveling. So on each day, they were driving for around 18 hours, 18 to 17.5 hours. So in the next part, I will also be breaking down how much time they were consuming for charging, according to the 850 kilowatt number that they have given, and how much additional time on top of it was available as well. So the next question I thought was, why 300 kilometers per hour? The Mercedes AMG GT XX is actually quite capable to achieve up to 360 kilometers per hour speeds, but 300 kilometers per hour was the speed determined by their engineers as the best trade-off number. Trade-off, I mean, with achieving record track times as well as reducing the number of charging. You can see this is my article, but what I wanted to show you was, after breaking down the complete data, what was available. So the motor that has been used in AMG GT XX is developed by YASA, which are now owned by Mercedes. And instead of using the conventional radial motors that we are all aware of, they use the axial flux motors. So they are using 3 motors, so 2 are at the back and 1 is at the front, and together they can deliver a total of 1,360 horsepower. And this is a cool part. So they have 3 times higher power density than the radial motors with smaller size and lower weight. The weight is reduced by 67%, the power density is increased by 3 times, as well as the torque density is also increased by 2 times. So for the battery design, there is also something new over here. Rather than using the prismatic cells that we know majority of the EV manufacturers are using, they went for cylindrical cells because they are using the NCM battery chemistry. So there are more than 3,000 cells actually inside this battery. This is the information they have disclosed. But why cylindrical cells? I was recently at an exhibition where I saw immersive cooling concept. So if you have prismatic cells, to really control heat on each cell level is kind of complex. But let's suppose you have cylindrical cells. What you can do is you have cylindrical cells, but you have submerged them in an oil which is non-conductive. This is a solution I saw from Castrol as well as Total Energies. And with that, you can optimally control the temperature of all of these 3,000 cells that are over there. You can reach there directly, which reduces the risk of thermal propagation. In case some cell behaves badly, there is very little chance of thermal propagation, which could result in EV fires. Also, it is based on 800 volt architecture, which means that it can charge with, normally I would have said 300, 400 kilowatts. No, but for Mercedes AMG GT XX, it can charge at an average of 850 kilowatts. And I'm not talking that it's going to charge with a megawatt charger. I'm talking with a CCS charger. So looking at the picture over here, you can see that it's an Alpitronic HYC 1000, which is their megawatt system. Normally, Alpitronic, we all know, is very popular for their all-in-one designs. For example, 75 kilowatts, 150 kilowatts, 300 kilowatts, 400 kilowatts. But for the first time last year, they said, okay, we are going to a different dimension. We are also going to manufacture distributed system. What does distributed system mean? This is going to be a separate power unit, but it's going to be a separate charge post. And here we can see a charge post over here. It is equipped with a CCS cable. So this is a 1000 amp cable, and usually when you hear the number 1000 amps, you're like, oh, it's going to be quite heavy. But actually, I tested it at Power to Drive from Phoenix Contact. It was 20% lighter than the other cables which are liquid cooled, for example. I mean, I'm talking about 500 amps. In the launch picture, they showed a 1000 kilowatt Phoenix Contact connector, but here during the official video, I could see an Amphenol connector. I'm not sure what happened over here, which is the connector over there, but what I know is the charger is 1000 kilowatt. It's a megawatt charger with CCS connector, which means that it is absolutely amazing because we are not talking about different new standard. It is using the connectors that are present today. Talking about the human side, so after every 2 hours, the drivers were rotated. During the drivers list, I would say is also quite phenomenal. George Russell, F1 driver from Mercedes AMG Petronas team, was also present and participated in this endurance run, but there were also some drivers from GT Racing. So it was a heavy stuffed team, I would say. So lastly, what are the numbers that Mercedes hasn't disclosed? For example, what is the battery capacity that was used in Mercedes AMG GT XX? Also, they haven't disclosed what were the degradation numbers after this brutal endurance run. What was the state of health at the beginning? What is the state of health at the end? I think me and a lot of e-mobility enthusiasts would like to hear these results as well. I'm not sure if we are ever going to see it. And finally, I forgot to introduce myself in the beginning. Who am I? I'm Sayed Hasibasan. I'm an automotive engineer with 10 years of experience working in Germany's automotive industry, 6 years at a tier 1 automotive supplier for clutches, flywheels, did projects for US, Japanese OEMs, as well as British OEMs. And for the last 4 years, I was working at a charger manufacturer, and hence I have a perspective from someone who is working in the industry, and I would like to share with you all. And if you like the video and if you think about supporting me, you can like the video, you can subscribe to my channel, as well as you can subscribe to my newsletter, which I publish on my website etechvolution.com, where I try to dissect really hot trending automotive topics. So see you in part 2. Thank you.